Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister tried to criticize us for asking questions on the CanSino deal. It turns out we weren't the only ones with questions, Mr. Speaker. The Globe and Mail is reporting that the government's own vaccine task force recommended against working with CanSino. The Prime Minister has said repeatedly that scientists were guiding the government's decision with respect to the vaccine. Why did this government make an exception for the Chinese pharmaceutical giant CanSino?
The Honourable Minister.
From the very beginning, Mr. Speaker, we stepped up for Canadians. We reached out to procure potential vaccines from every possible source. We were not going to close any door that would maybe help Canadians. We ended up, therefore, with 7 contracts signed with a diverse group of the top vaccine manufacturers in the world. We will continue to ensure we're doing everything we can, based on the best advice of experts, to get these vaccines to Canadians so we can get through this pandemic once and for all.
Chef d'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The first door the Prime Minister opened was with China. We also found out last week the government had been briefed on the security risks involving the Chinese company CanSino. The Prime Minister said that news report was making things up. Now we learn that the scientists agreed with the security experts on CanSino. So if the security experts were against partnering with China and the scientists were against partnering with China, why did the government partner with China?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we signed 7 contracts with different vaccine producers from around the world in order to deliver vaccines reliably to Canadians. And we looked for all partnerships, including something that was a successful partnership in developing an Ebola vaccine a number of years ago with CanSino. That one didn't pan out for a number of different reasons, but what we are left with is 7 extraordinary contracts that have secured more doses per capita for Canadians, potentially, than any other country in the world.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we lost 5 months on the China deal that the Prime Minister said didn't pan out. We didn't prioritize domestic vaccine production. The government didn't listen. Instead of pursuing a made-in-Canada solution that was actually put forward by their own experts, the Liberals signed off on a partnership with CanSino. They put millions into a facility for that partnership that they were told wasn't ready for vaccine production. Why did this Prime Minister favour a made-in-China solution instead of the made-in-Canada solution their own experts were demanding?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way we leaned on our experts, on the immunity task force, on the vaccination task force, to make recommendations on what we should do to ensure a solid supply of potential vaccines to Canadians. And that advice actually led us to being in the enviable position of having more doses from more companies than just about any other country. And we are hopeful to be receiving our first vaccinations next week. This is what a government that listens to experts and works hard for Canadians has been able to deliver.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, last week the New York Times illustrated how easy it was to access child pornography on an adult site. And they continue their activity because the federal government isn't doing anything about it. This company has its head office in Montreal. When will the Liberal government open an investigation onto this issue to protect our young people? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are working actively on the creation of new regulations to force online platforms to remove illegal content. That includes hate comments, child sexual exploitation, and violent or extremist content. Our approach will ensure that illegal content will be removed quickly, the platforms will be monitored, and victims will have access to a quick, transparent, and independent process. We are working with our international partners on this initiative and will be putting forth the regulations as soon as possible.
The opposition.
En mars, des députés.
In March, Canadian senators and MPs from 4 political parties sent a letter to the Minister of Justice calling for steps to be taken to deal with these companies producing pornographic material. With respect to age, verification of age, and the removal of content. When will the government take action to protect our young people from sexual exploitation? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we are working actively at present on measures for new regulations to force online platforms to withdraw all illegal content, be it sexual exploitation of children, child pornography, or hateful comments. We will always be there to protect Canadians, and we are working on measures to put in place. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and allow me to say quickly that the government has our support for all measures to put an end to sexual exploitation of young people. On a different topic now, we know that the government could have had vaccines made in Canada and could have had adequate facilities. We know that it could have done without. It could have synchronized its steps for approval. It could have taken a number of steps, but it didn't do so. To hide it under the carpet, the government is buying 250 million doses for Quebec. That means some 30,000 doses. We can't even look after seniors in, say, Sherbrooke, for example. When are we going to take more action that's more than just cosmetic? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since the beginning, we have been working with scientists and experts who've made recommendations on how to protect Canadians. On their advice, we signed more contracts with more companies developing a vaccine than any other country, and we have secured scores of doses of vaccine, more than any other country. Vaccines could arrive as early as next week. Production is underway, and we will be able to vaccinate many, many Canadians in the start of 2021. The Honourable Member. Regardless of what's already been done, it wasn't done well enough because there are delays. Now, with respect to the choices of the government, it's a false and dangerous sense of security. But only 125,000 people will be vaccinated, so that's inadequate. Can the Prime Minister talk about the plan and raise the issue on Thursday and come through with increased health transfers as the Premiers are requesting? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are working to deliver vaccines as quickly as possible, and it, of course, depends on production by companies that will be providing these vaccines. With respect to the Premiers, I have worked with them for the months now to deliver billions of dollars in assistance for the health care systems, alongside the armed forces and the Red Cross. We will ensure that everything during the crisis, that the provinces have everything they need from the federal government. I'm keen to.
Member for Burnaby South.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians were encouraged to hear that a small quantity of vaccines would be coming from Pfizer, but that's the problem. It's difficult to transport it, to store it, and we're very concerned for our seniors. They need to have access to the vaccine. The Moderna vaccine can help. What is the plan for the Moderna vaccine to protect our seniors? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have worked with all vaccine companies to ensure that we obtain doses quickly in compliance with all rules. There are 4 companies that are currently being assessed, including Pfizer and Moderna. We hope that the Pfizer vaccine will arrive shortly, and Moderna in the months to come. We know that it will take different types of vaccines to help everyone, and that's why we're confident that we will be in a position to vaccinate 3 million Canadians in early 2021. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians were encouraged by the announcement of a small quantity of Pfizer vaccines being available in Canada. But the Pfizer vaccine presents some problems. It's difficult to store and difficult to transport, and it won't be available for people who live outside of major Canadian cities. And I think about the outbreaks in Indigenous communities and rural and remote communities and the fact that they won't have access. The Moderna vaccine is promising in solving some of those problems, but we want to know what the plan is. So what is the plan for the Moderna vaccine to provide access to people who live outside of major cities?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Pfizer is in the news right now because we are expecting to see the first deliveries of those vaccines as early as next week, and we can start working on the delivery of those vaccines, which are logistically more complex. Moderna vaccine is a somewhat more simple vaccine to transport and to administer. That is why we are counting on the Moderna vaccine to be able to reach further off communities and northern Canadians. That's why we are working very closely with Moderna to ensure that we get those doses to them as quickly as possible. As I said, we're expecting millions of people to be vaccinated, the most vulnerable.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister has a big idea, and it involves your bank account. She's very worried that Canadians are saving too much, even though those same savings are lent out to and invested in other job-creating businesses. So now she's looking for ideas on how the government can act to unlock those savings of Canadians. Does the government really believe that holding Canadians upside down by the ankles and shaking their change loose is a stimulus plan?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
The Conservatives are misconstruing my words. It almost makes me wonder if they're doing it on purpose. The fact is, there is nothing dystopian or even very complicated about the idea of a preloaded stimulus. We all know that local small businesses are the heart of our economy. We all also know that because of physical distancing, we are unable to patronize them now. That is why, as soon as it is safe for our economy to fully reopen, our government is looking for ways to encourage Canadians to support our local small business.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Preloaded stimulus. It sounds like she wants to use Canadian savings as her own preloaded credit card. But this is no surprise from a government that's running the biggest deficit in the G20 by far, even with the worst unemployment other than Italy, and among the higher rates of COVID mortality. But now the minister says she has no fiscal anchor. Instead, she has fiscal guardrails that will one day be attached to a fiscal anchor. Won't the anchor at the bottom of the sea pull those guardrails off the edge of the cliff?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite still seems to have some trouble understanding why it's good economics to support our small businesses and to encourage Canadians to do that. So let me quote someone he might find a little more simpatico. Ontario's Conservative Premier Doug Ford. Here's what he's had to say. Now more than ever, we need to support our own. During COVID-19, business supported communities and healthcare workers. Now it's time for us to support them as consumers. I couldn't agree more.
Dislike, subscribe, and comment. Safe Space Cafe. And always, have a good night. Stay tuned for the last half coming out tonight. Lots more.